maybe we just get this ball rolling and maybe go around, do a couple introductions here. I have my co-host Jedi Sherpa with me on here as always, and maybe start with a little bit about how this little sub-DAO formed, and we can just kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's up, everybody? My name is Panchito, and basically, I guess from the early formation of how we got our sub-DAO rolling was, first and foremost, we knew from the get-go that there is no second best attribute. These are the words that were coined by one of our leaders, really the leader, Milst, who should be in here at some point. He said he would stop by for a bit. But basically, after the monkeys minted, I would say a couple weeks went by. I got my entrance into Solana NFTs probably 2 weeks after the monkeys minted, and just happened to come across this dude that had a sombrero on his head and was like, "Yo, this is pretty cool." And at that time, there was a lot of derivative, like the OG derivative artists that were kind of drawing for folks. And I'm not sure if anyone's aware. I know the Banditos are, but Fede is one of them. And Fede's been around the space from the get-go. And so I initially hit him up and was like, "Hey, dude, do you want to do a little derivative for me?" And we got to talking and kind of developed a little bit of a relationship. And he's like, "Oh, my actual brother is Milst." And I was like, "Oh, no shit. That's dope." So I reached out to Milst and was like, "Hey, what do you think about seeing if we can't round up everybody that has a monkey with a sombrero and kind of putting something together where we could kind of have something a little bit like a subgroup from the actual Monkey DAO?" Because the Monkey DAO is an amazing place. What they're doing, what they're building is absolutely incredible. But at the same time, as a new entrant for me at the time, it was a little bit overwhelming with the amount of folks that were in there. It's a large collection of 5,000. And I think at the time there was maybe 1,200 to 1,400 members. And I just kind of was like, what if we tried to create a smaller community somewhere where we could just hang out and, shoot the shit. So I think it was August 29th is when we officially made a Discord and started hunting everybody down that had a sombrero monkey. Mainly that was kind of the early days. So a lot of folks were rocking the monkey profile pictures. So we just started sending out messages and got everybody into a group, and that was kind of the beginning. From that point on, once we started to kind of collect all the folks, there's 98 total sombreros in the collection, and I think a few of them got swept into the Rory, whatever heist that was. So a few of them I think are frozen, and so in the early days, I think it was myself, Git. I think BTB was there, Shake. Those were some of the original guys, and then we had some heavy hitters come through when they kind of saw what we kind of got started. We decided to make an official Twitter account, and Lolly came in and J5 came in and really kind of took it to the next level when talking about what are the potential things that we could actually do with a sub-DAO. And Lolly, the dude is a mad scientist when it comes to governance. He started writing a model for us, kind of put some framework into place of how we could actually run things as a decentralized autonomous organization within the greater Monkey DAO. And, I would definitely love to have him come on and J5 as well, and kind of speak more to that in terms of the kind of governance framework and what it means to be an actual sub-DAO. But I'd like to also say that it's also become a really cool place for, a smaller, more agile community to kind of, we all like to keep our anonymity, but it's also a place within the the sub DAO within the BanditoDAO that, you know, we've really become friends, that we kind of like check in every day, you know, talk about different trends within the market. We have a bunch of different sub channels. We have alpha channel. We have, you know, actual coin tracking channels. We got some great traders within our group to kind of provide a macro outlook on what the actual market's doing, and actually got some cool plans in place to kind of expand on what we're doing. So, I mean, with that said, I'd love to bring some of the other guys up and they can talk more about this, or if you have, you know, any thoughts, Function, about what I've spoken to. Lolly, you want to come up and
Yeah.
give us some more?
Yeah, of course. Actually, just kind of my background. I did mint the SMB mint. However, it's probably only about 3 weeks after the mint. Prices started increasing slightly, and so I ended up actually selling I minted a Space Warrior SMB that I then ended up selling to someone for a pretty good return, only to later find out a few months later as Soul Big Brain was announcing that he was moving some of his SMBs to his cold wallet to never be moved again. I saw my SMB sitting in there and realized I had sold to him. So I had actually sold out of SMB, and I was getting involved in other NFTs when I finally kind of got over the salt of having sold out, and I was pretty active in Cope and got connected actually with Mills through a smaller Twitter private channel that we had with a few different guys. And I really liked what the brand and marketing that he was kind of handling with the Banditos. I mean, there is no second best attribute. You've got something like the sombrero. It's very iconic. It is something that's very noticeable and can prove to be really good for marketing and really selling that image of what we are and standing out within an ecosystem that's only kind of getting more busy, more loud. So I actually ended up buying a sombrero SMB, and I joined the BanditoDAO. There's a lot of big names in there, like Austin from Audius. There's A2K from Exchange, Mills from Exchange. Kate ended up joining a little bit later, Solana Targaryen from Skyline. Quite a few bigger names were in there, which was great. And what I realized is, like I think Pinchito said, Monkey DAO, it was large. And so, especially in a space that's growing, it's very difficult to, without having a strong governance or system in place, it's really difficult to really get large groups organized. And so I chose to spend more time within the BanditoDAO specifically because it was a smaller group. All of the guys were really engaged, and we all were in a very similar mindset and approach to the ecosystem. And so it just kind of felt a lot more natural and kind of at home. And so really what I saw as the next step, I come from a background in pharma where I've done a lot of work with large-scale integrations of organizations and quality systems and organizational governance. And I realized the number one thing in all those areas is having strong and clear governance, establishing your operating model, understanding what the scope of everyone's function and roles are, and having it clearly defined what you're working towards, and the specific objectives to get there is always very critical in any type of large-scale project where you're trying to coordinate across a lot of different people. And so with the BanditoDAO, that was the first thing I kind of thought was, we all have this idea of what we want. There's a huge potential within the ecosystem as Web3 and metaverses and all this is expanding that we can really create this brand, the Banditos, that was really catching on within Twitter and other places, that we can really kind of take that to the next level. And being a little bit more aligned and coordinated, I thought was the best way to do it. But we did run into one key issue. And that went back to how do you scale it? The ecosystem is growing. We're an SMB collection right now where we're a subgroup where there was 98 NFTs. Some of them were frozen. So what could we do? And that's where you can see on the Bandito website, which J5 did an amazing job on. I created several different governance documents really outlining what is the mission and the goal of the BanditoDAO. And really it's to make the Brero and what it stands for a common icon within the Web3 and metaverse systems, but also to ensure collections are including that, and created almost like a two-tiered system where we could scale and include new collections or new sombreros from collections into what we called an Estado model, where you would have the overarching BanditoDAO SMB organization handling more the large-scale governance and organization structure. And then you have these additional sub-DAOs under it that are operating near autonomously just within the general framework for of what the BanditoDAO kind of sets out. And this was kind of our way of looking at how can we keep the message, expand the BanditoDAO and grow as the ecosystem grows to make sure that that message is hitting all the different areas, and it enables and empowers individuals that really kind of like what we're building. They want to step in, they want to kind of build their own model of it. It really gives them the opportunity and the ability to do so. Now, that said, we haven't established it as of yet. We've been talking more and more about it. And the key is this just goes back to logistics and maturing in the space. We want to make sure that as we move forward, there's a lot of new DAO infrastructure and tools being put into place. We want to make sure that we don't start executing anything too early prior to tools and the ability to actually be able to manage it and grow kind of as intended.
Man, that is awesome. First off, I could tell you that you put a lot of thought into this, and the first question I have is, how did you articulate that governance structure in such a way in documentation or presentation in such a way that everybody could understand it and start to align around those loose structures that allowed for, almost autonomous distributed, decentralized participation?
I think this was kind of what's key with being in a small group is, really what I did is I just drafted some documents and submitted them around in the DAO for people to review and give comments, feedback, and we just kind of adjusted some from there. But in bulk, most of it was accepted pretty well. And I think it just really goes back to being a small group. We're able to communicate things a lot better, more consistently across the entire group. And as I've been working, so I haven't just worked with the BanditoDAO, but I've been kind of floating around to a ton of different organizations and DAOs and giving them some support. What I realized is I was more and more pushing people away from trying to start using DAO infrastructure tools because they're now starting to be available, things like Tribeca, Realm, Squads, because what I realized is most of what people are doing in these groups, you could implement DAO infrastructure for it, but unless you're doing something that you're issuing proposals that are large investments where you're using a lot of capital from the treasury, or they have very significant impacts on the direction of how the organization is moving, or there's potential legal implications. A great example is like with the SMB, a recent governance proposal that went through about how they want to handle the developer royalties. Issues like that, I am very strongly supportive of using on-chain governance because there's real-world impact if it's not done properly. But the majority of proposals that I've seen most groups are using is not nearly at those high of stakes or potential consequences. And what I realized in a lot of instances is when you start implementing DAO tools, yes, it ensures that you have proper integrity to the votes. You can track everything back and validate weighting based on the number of NFTs people have and everything. But what you're also doing is you're adding an additional barrier or additional step that people have to go through to be able to submit their opinion on the proposal. And in some cases, it's just not worth that, where you have people that are jumping between hundreds of different Discord channels. They may be a member of the BanditoDAO or a different DAO. They may just be checking announcements, seeing how things are kind of going quickly. And adding that extra step may be something that may deter away from voting in the proposal versus having a Discord bot. And you, or even just a Discord channel where you're having people vote based on emojis. When it comes to most proposals, most questions, most polls, that tends to be enough. And when you have a small group like the BanditoDAO, quite honestly, it made us very nimble because we were able to set up a proposal and within a few hours get probably 25 to 30% of the BanditoDAO to vote. And 99% of the time, it's always pretty one-sided. And once we see that, we know we can just move forward with the proposal. There may be a few people that may have disagreed with that, but in general, there is that consistent alignment. And being small, we have kind of found we know when we're going to be producing a proposal or something, chances are everyone's going to be most likely aligned. And this is then where it gets into a little bit more, I think, a little bit more subjective, because I've even realized there was one proposal we had that was a bit split. And it was still enough that one side won. It was like, I think 60% to 40%. But what I realized is, this is the only vote we've had where there's been a split. Even though one side has won, do we really want to move forward with it? Is it really that important? Because in a small group with only 90 people, when you have 40% saying that they don't agree with it, that can cause a lot of discontent in those individuals, especially if it was something that they feel very strongly about. So unless there is a significant reason to move forward, we decided to, take a step back and not move forward with that proposal, even though it had gotten enough votes and one side had won, simply because we wanted to ensure social cohesion within the group and not make decisions or proposals that will disenfranchise or not be the preference of some of the banditos. I don't think it's always just about winning that 51% or 60% for votes, because a lot of times we're polling and we're just getting information from people. And I think having flexibility in how you do proposals is really important, and having different tiers and criteria for it to make sure that you're empowering the group. You're not causing something that could deteriorate the group through kind of destroying some of that social cohesion or making some people a little upset within the group. You want people to feel very strong support of the DAO, have their social identity tied to that, because that's really what keeps people coming back and engaged.
Man, there was a whole lot in there. Primarily what I'm picking up from that is this natural progression that I think like a formation of a DAO goes through, where it starts with a small group who, by one way or another, like come to self-organizing in this distributed way, but they can be nimble still and quick because it's a small group and they have the ability to communicate directly with each other, or it's small enough where votes can get through quickly. But then it's like, it seems to me, in the way that I've been thinking about it, seems like you are as well, is like, how do you, as early as possible, instantiate the cultural norms that would allow for that to scale and grow bigger? And part of that is maintaining like a sensitivity to the group itself, and it can't be just about winning 51%. The price of winning 51% and moving forward on that is so huge, because you could split the group in half. The cost might not be worth it. And so how do you find that right balance of like, how much alignment from the group do you need to move forward? How much participation from the group as a whole do you need in order to see it as being voted on sufficiently? All of these are good questions, and that need probably different answers depending on the context and the specific goal of the DAO.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really key point that I've been looking into a lot more, and it goes back to really establishing those kind of social norms and understanding. I think what we face a lot in NFTs right now, and what a lot of people are trying to combat, is the flipping mentality, where people run to one mint, it doesn't turn out well, so they just move on to the next. And you really then struggle to have DAOs really build a community that is then engaged in the project and helps kind of see the project through. What I've noticed is the ecosystem has shifted, where in Web 2, users were consumers of products, be it DeFi products, be it whatever. You might have small groups of people kind of collaborating or chatting or working together, but it wasn't really till Web 3 and these DAO communities formed that you're now creating a community as an operational unit of your project. They are performing very specific actions or tasks within either a protocol or the group. And you rely on them to be successful as a project. So what I'm been looking at more is that to change the incentive models, because everyone's flipping because they want ROI. And when ROI is your culture, then the moment someone can get better ROI somewhere else, they're just going to jump to that next project. What you can't change, or what you can't get elsewhere, though, is the culture that you build within your community. Even if someone tries to recreate that culture, it's still not going to be the same as your organization, your community's specific culture that developed organically. And from there, when you can build a community and focus on establishing or incentivizing or building interpersonal relationships between people within that community, what you're doing is you're moving away from that model or that mentality that it's a user consuming a product where you're really operating on your own and the only benefit you have is your wallet and the amount of tokens in your wallet. And what you're moving to is now you have people that have formed relationships, friendships. They tie their social identity on Twitter with PFPs to that group. And so now you're forming a much stronger or bigger entity where people care. It's like the BanditoDAO board, for example. You've got people jumping up at the opportunity to join that board and to be voted in. It's an uncompensated role, and the workload is crazy high for everything that they need to do. And so the question goes back to, why are people not being financially incentivized to work 8 hours a day in some cases, doing it pretty much for free? And I think it goes back to really unlocking and understanding different incentive models that we can use within these groups, specifically related to reputation and prestige. Because when you've built a solid community where people care about each other, then you have people that actually care about their image, their reputation, and how they are viewed within that group. And you, I think, then enable new models that you can incentivize people, get more engagement from people, and also then further that relationship within the DAO to help build it.
Man, this is so awesome, because I think like there's something that you're pointing to, this like the identity being tied to it, right? And I think something that NFTs in particular are doing are, and the communities that are forming them around them, are giving people a place to house some of their identity. And so I think once, like, as these DAOs form and they get better, right, like the communities that form around them become a part of the participant's identity. And if people can be a part of multiple, DAO scenarios in the virtual Web3 space, I think that can be really supportive to an integrated sense of self in real life. I think a lot of what people are missing is a sense of community and a sense of like feeling like they belong to something that's meaningful to them. And DAOs more and more are going to give people the opportunity to be a part of that in various ways, and to bring their gifts and participate and have an image online, have an identity online that is backed up by these communities that they are a part of. And I think there's like so much potential for like a positive influence on society, as a result of that, from DAOs. And so that's a big part of why I'm excited to be exploring this space.
And I think going one step further, I think we get into this mindset that crypto is a trustless system. And I'm trying to help people break away from that image because the tools are trustless. When you submit a transaction, yes, you can verify that transaction went through. But we're still socializing, collaborating, working together as people behind these computer screens with one another. And no matter what we do, as long as we're collaborating, working together, we are going to have to operate based on trust because we have to trust each other's intentions and what we're telling each other, communicating how we're working with one another. And I think through enabling these DAOs and enabling reputation-based incentive models and maturing these communities and groups, what you're actually doing also is you're creating almost a trust system without having to quantify it or pull it down to technical protocol or infrastructure. Because what I found myself is I'm pretty active with Stylish Studs and Fine Phillies for the Photo Finish Live. And during one of the breeding events, I was working with someone who wanted to use one of my studs in the Monkey DAO. I had never known the guy before, but all I did was in the Monkey DAO, I did a quick search of his name, and I saw he had been in there for probably a good 3 to 4 months or so. And instantly I felt comfortable giving him a almost $10,000 NFT to use for 10 minutes and then send back to me, a guy I never met before. And I started questioning why. Why do I feel comfortable doing that with someone that's completely random and a stranger on the internet? And I realized that by having these communities grow and mature and having there be demand where people want to be part of that and having people have social identity and reputations within those groups, now that puts it makes it much easier to trust because now it's not, is this guy going to rip me off? It's, is it worth it to this guy to destroy his reputation within the Monkey DAO for an NFT that's worth $10,000 when the SMB is worth much more? No. And I think if we can work to mature these communities that are using DAOs, we connect, not just having within the individual community, but we start to try to interconnect and collaborate across all these large DAOs, we'll be able to create a system that people are going to be more trusting and open because they know the consequences of someone acting negatively and representing their DAO is not going to be taken very well, and it's going to cause significant damage to their reputation in this space that is only growing. And most of the people, like everyone on here, probably doesn't want their reputation within this space to be tarnished this early in what could be and what's going to become.
Yeah, and in building on that, what you guys are talking about with the people and identity and culture within the decentralized communities, that shared interest has a profound effect on social consensus, because at the end of the day, it's the culture that is going to determine the values and shared vision. So, everything that Lale is speaking towards is something that, happens over iterations of decision making and culture building over, in the case of BanditoDAO, like 5-6 months, right? And that gives us like a certain autonomy and an ability to just move quickly because everybody is really on the same page on a daily basis. It's pretty amazing to see that effect.
J5, do you want to kind of give a little basis of your background with being on the Monkey DAO board, as well as like the differences that you've seen between the Monkey DAO and how the operations is with the BanditoDAO, and just kind of, the similarities, but also the differences between the two?
Well, with BanditoDAO, I'm J5, everybody. Hi, I guess I'll introduce myself. Got into NFTs around mid-late August, I think in the 20s, like August 25th or 23rd, I bought an SMB as my first NFT. I've been in crypto since like late 2016. Really started getting into it in the 2017 bull run. And this time around with NFTs, at first I come from the music business, and believe it or not, at first I didn't really get NFTs. Maybe like early 2021, I started, kind of migrating towards it, and eventually it just really clicked for me that, holy crap, like this is going to change music forever. I need to get involved with this, just for my own, IRL career or whatever. That led me to, BanditoDAO. I was kind of afraid to put the amount of money that ETH NFTs, would require at the time, because it was my first NFT purchase. And, I'm not like a huge risk taker, degen level. So, I was like, I think the floor for monkeys was already, 60 or 80 SOL, which was about like 15 grand at the time. So I was like, this is right in the sweet spot of, there's not a ton of, extra fees or gas or, anything like that. So, that led me to, kind of getting involved with the SMB community. After I had invested that amount of money, I was like, I want to know what this is about. So BanditoDAO was kind of new at the time. And, what I noticed right away was like, this is a huge community of vastly different people coming from all different backgrounds and cultures from all over the world. And, that is, one of the greatest things ever. But when it comes to like making a simple decision on, maybe like, let's partner with this other project that has devs that could help us do something, right? It can cause like an absolute racket in terms of, splitting the community on, no, this, we shouldn't do this or we should do this. Some people are like totally cool with derivative collections. Other people are not at all. So what I noticed was that it was very hard to like, make decisions that don't really even have like a profound effect on the community. Just simple like day-to-day decisions that, need to occur. And at this time we didn't have like any on-chain voting or any kind of, real system other than like, Discord emojis. And, there was just always, very, heavy decisions. Like every decision felt like a heavy decision because there were such strong opinions. And usually like the negative opinions are very loud within these communities, right? I think we all kind of, pick up on that at some point on our NFT journey, is that, you can have a very small percentage of people that are actually like, sending the loudest message. And, so it's really hard to kind of gauge which way you should even vote sometimes within an organization of that size. Now, as things have progressed with BanditoDAO, we've gotten better tools in place. And then, for the second epoch of, the board, I was elected, to join the monkey board, and, that was just like an incredible experience. I absolutely loved it. I learned so much and really got into like what makes a DAO, and like, Vali and I would go back and forth in messages, and is this even really a DAO? Like it's more like a social community. It's more of a decentralized community or a social token, maybe is a good way to put it. Because there's no real protocol, right? We kind of took this DAO phrase and we, blanketed it over all of these different types of organizations that exist and protocols that exist within crypto, because we're like breaking new ground and there's no real clear, definition for all of these separate things, right? And so that's when we started to like go back and forth on the culture of things. And, I maybe, entered BanditoDAO in September time or something like that. And, immediately when I entered BanditoDAO, I realized how nimble this group of people are. What attracted me to Banditos was, seeing them move so quickly and, have this huge reputation within the crypto community within just like a month of time. And I think that a lot of that had to do with everybody kind of being on the same page, building a certain type of culture. And so now back to like the DAO conversation. I think that it's really important to clarify that these social communities don't have logical consensus. They have social consensus. And therefore the culture is absolutely everything within the community. There might be some kind of logical consensus behind it, right? But it's, there's not a clear distinction between like a MakerDAO or BanditoDAO, right? If you're somebody on the outside that doesn't really understand that one is a protocol and one is a social community, there's no difference, so to speak, right? So I think that it's, that's the stage that we're in right now in terms of discovering as a community and as a collective. The crypto world is starting to get to that place where we're starting to realize that all of these different things are actually vastly different from each other. And so Lolly, I think that you could pick up from there on kind of what we're working on trying to define culture and trying to reveal the importance of that, because it's really 50% of the equation. And then we can start to implement protocols that benefit our culture and execute the vision of our communities.
I think that hits kind of the key point, and we're looking at scalability, and everyone's looking at technical scalability as the key limiting factor. And I think what we're trying to also do is challenge that view, because I think there's going to get to a point, if we're not close to it already, where technical scalability is not the rate limiting factor anymore. And I think we're actually already there. I think what the rate limiting factor is our ability to collaborate and work together as a group within this decentralized setting where people can jump between different DAOs. They can just ghost and go offline. They could sell their PFP at any time. So how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep people empowered and wanting to drive it forward? How do you make sure people clearly understand what you're doing so that you can do it efficiently? I think those are the questions that are posing it right now. And how do you ensure value that is generated within these groups and systems is maintained by these groups, and it's not diverted somewhere else? And I think as J5 kind of highlights, we can try to establish technical systems to solve everything, but at the end of the day, you're using logic-based systems to try to minimize the risk from illogical human-based entities. And instead, I think we need to take a new approach and relook at it and understand the key difference between us and technical systems. And I think it goes back to the framework. And when we say DAO, I think the biggest issue I have is, and what made me start questioning a lot, is anytime I asked someone what a DAO was, everyone gave me a different answer. And it made me and J5 start looking a little bit more intently of, are these groups DAOs? I mean, you're looking at Ethereum and you have DAOs that decide governance or decide allocation of incentives and things that are pretty clear, true DAOs. They perform a very defined and specific activity within a platform, and that's it. But these communities are very different. You're not having a clear and defined goal. Advancing the community is not a concrete objective thing. There's so many different subjective opinions and input into it. And so I think by recognizing that, splitting apart the DAO from the community and starting to look at these groups like MonkeyDAO, not as a DAO, but as a community that's empowered by a DAO, now you're going to break it into two very different systems that you have to evaluate solutions for. The first being the actual DAO part, the governance. the treasury management, how you are organizationally set up, what are roles, what are incentive models. Those are all the things I would say very clearly are DAO. You're setting process and protocol. You're assigning roles to people, which as we advance and mature in this space, those roles are going to start having very defined processes and systems. Because a true DAO, if you look back at the original definition by Vitalik, it was a protocoled system. And you can protocol things either by smart contract or in people, you can do it through assigning roles with clear scopes and following standard procedures where you just do the actions as intended without a care of the outcome. Now, again, that's the DAO aspect, and the community aspect is now a lot bigger because it's a lot more subjective. And the elements that are at risk are social cohesion and things that don't necessarily have technical solutions. But we've been functioning as societies for millennia. And societies form naturally in very different ways. But there's common elements, culture being one, social norms. And when we start understanding these sociological elements and trying to understand what makes groups of people successful, and instead of just looking for technical solutions, try to leverage our knowledge and understanding of how we collaborate as people, then I think we unlock a more efficient way to scale. Because it's like a lot of people like to talk about social scores or that are reputation scores. I think reputation scores have their place. I think they're very valid for newcomers into the space that don't understand the space or understand the people. And it gives you a good frame of reference to recognize, okay, this person's probably pretty reputable or not. But the problem is, again, you're using a logic-based system for a non-logic-based thing, reputation. It's abstract. If you had a group of friends and you all had a reputation score, but your best friend goes behind your back and fucks your girlfriend, his reputation score still may be fairly high, but that doesn't mean you trust him anymore. There's downfalls, I think, to those type of approaches. But when you're within the community, if you're an active member of your community, you know the main players. You know who they are. You know what they're willing to do. So if we are able to empower that and grow those type of communities and figure out how to keep social cohesion and engagement, I think we will have less need for these technical solutions because we're going to naturally be able to leverage things like reputation to understand, should we be trusting these people? And then it goes back to what I was saying earlier. When you have that established, now you can instill more trust because you know people are not going to fuck it up as much because they are so much more at risk. And then by connecting the different communities, when you have scammers or someone doing something in one community, if those communities are talking through leadership or through some type of group, then you know what? They can call each other up and say, hey, I heard you're a guy from your DAO did this.
I mean, it's that balance between logical consensus and social consensus, and finding the sweet spot for every community is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be determined by the values and culture and all, the things that Lali is talking about. Thank you for summing that up so eloquently. I was tripping a little bit over my words, it puts it in perfect perspective, because at the end of the day, you have to manage the treasury, you have to manage all of these things, and that can be done through some form of logical consensus. But without the social consensus, it's very difficult to execute all those things. And that's where the DAO tooling and, I think that's really the next wave for our evolution is creating the tools that we need to implement these things. But if people aren't aware of these two sides that have to balance each other, then, it's an uphill battle, and it's full of bureaucracy and, us tripping over our decision making, which is
100%.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to get past.
You guys are, this is such a cool conversation. What you shared earlier, Lali, about the trust piece, to go back to that. Like, I think the tools that are trustless actually compel an environment where more trust is necessary to operate effectively between the individuals.
Absolutely.
And so it's actually forcing us to trust each other more, because we don't get to outsource the responsibility of deciding trustworthiness to centralized organizations anymore. All right. And so, that is the ground upon which those relationships and those groups and those communities form, adjacent to, the technical solutions that do solve some issues and decrease latency in some cases, but they're definitely not the whole picture. They're a small part of it. And I do agree with you that I don't think those are the rate limiting factor anymore. I think it's more, it's like there's a lot of the rate limiting components exist in the social realm, and the ability to be sensitive to a group, to assess trust accurately and effectively individually rather than outsourcing that responsibility, and being able to look to the implied markers like you did of reputation. There was a way for you to ascertain reputation in that case that wasn't explicitly a measurement, but it was still there. And I think that's really the sweet spot, is like finding ways. And I think it might be the overlapping communities and people's participation in multiple communities that ultimately kind of implies their reputation rather than making it something explicit like a measurement. And we're talking about kind of this paradox and the parallel development that happens within a DAO context, and really it kind of happens around the ambiguity of the discussion of DAOs. But one component is a very technical, logical, systematized solution to a part of the overall challenge. But adjacent to that is the formation of a community and the real trust building that happens between human beings and participants in the DAO, and having enough shared meaning for people to continue to show up and participate and contribute, and to the extent that it becomes a part of their identity and actually fortifies them as they participate in other spheres of their own life. So there's that piece of it. And so we're kind of diving deep on the theory and philosophy of DAOs and how that forms, and also talking about the BanditoDAO and where they're at in their development, and the organic way that it's forming. They're still small and thus able to communicate quickly and be nimble and quick, but also keeping in mind what is going to be necessary to scale as more people get engaged and participate. So I think that's my sum up. And if Lolly or J5 or any of you guys want to add to that, I'd be happy to.
I was going to chime in real quick. That's all right.
Yep.
So this is Git. I've minted monkeys, et cetera, et cetera. Been in the BanditoDAO since right after, I guess, Mills and Panchito got it up and going. And I was just going to say, us being a smaller team, one of the things that helps build trust and, all that is kind of, there's really not, we might not know how to do everything, but, none of the proposals are, everybody kind of asks permission to do something instead of let's do this, y'all handle it. So it's kind of like if you're going to bring something forward, you can't just, nobody's in there like devs do something, when's the number going to go up, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like, well, why don't we do this? I can handle this. Can anybody help me with, X, Y, Z that I don't understand? Because there's nobody else to do it. It's just us, which, even though it's kind of like, Lolly was pointing to earlier, maybe slightly more centralized with kind of some quick informal votes that, we get a consensus. Okay, let's go ahead. It's still, people are responsible, and it's not like, if you try something and it doesn't work out, nobody's like, okay, you're fired. But, everybody kind of has to kind of force participation almost in that way. Which I think is something that is much, much easier to do with a smaller group than it is with, 5,000, 6,000 people.
100%.
Yeah, I see where we're going. That's the thing. I'm sorry, Lolly. I'll let you talk in just a second. The clear vision of everybody's seeing this is the destination and we're heading towards that. Doing that with 5,000 people is very difficult. Doing that with 90 people is pretty simple, and there's not a lot of distraction from that direction that we're moving. Sorry about that, Lally. Go ahead, brother.
No, no worries at all. And I think it goes back to what I see a lot with especially expensive NFTs is if someone spent 200, 300, 400 Solana on an NFT, sometimes I've seen people come in with like this entitlement view that I just spent this much, therefore I should be getting X amount of benefit back. And I think a lot of that's coming back from that Web 2 mindset where people are wanting to consume or benefit because they invested in something. And the game is really different, especially with these groups. It's not about what these groups can do for you because you bought it. It's if you're buying that, you're going in because you want to help build it. And I think being a smaller group, it's much easier to see that because the people that are active, everyone's contributing. Yes, there's a social element, but pretty much everyone's doing something to help further the cause and to reach the goals, which is a bit different when you start going into other groups and other large DAOs where there is a lot more of the social element and maybe 10% of people are actively trying to contribute and build to that goal.
Yeah, that's it right there.
And so well said.
Lolly says everything better than the rest of us combined because, yeah, it's just the way it is.
Man, you guys are awesome. I'm so enjoying this conversation. For the last 5 years, myself and a small group have been operating in a similar way and designing our own governance, and we eventually came up with a constitution. And then now we're over in the Joes, like using that constitution as a foundation to build our DAO there. And it's so cool to see how many similarities that there are to the way that you guys have thought things out, the experience, the trajectory of the experience that you guys are on, and how we thought things out, and how deeply you guys are thinking about everything. Really, really, really cool.
Well, I think this is actually an opportunity where we can collaborate as an ecosystem a bit better because what I found across a lot of these communities, everyone has very similar problems when they're trying to establish a DAO or become a more formal group. And all of it really relates back to governance, structure, code of conduct, how do you establish engagement, and what we're doing right now is a lot of people are looking inwards. They're trying to define all these or find solutions within their small group because that's who they're comfortable with or who they know. If we can create a repository and resources so that as people are coming together and trying to form these groups, they know where to go to get initial frameworks or examples or understanding of how other people have solved these problems, I think we could standardize a bit more how communities are structured and set up, which one is going to make it easier for people to jump between different communities because you'll have a little bit more consistency and people will be able to make assumptions that will generally be correct. But also then as we grow, I think it allows us to communicate better when we're struggling with issues and problems because that base level, that framework is going to be a lot more consistent. As well, when you start having DAOs that are not just community-based, but looking at specific activities like, let's say, art DAOs and that, now you're not having to expect artists or people who are joining that DAO specifically because of that special interest to become governance experts. You can provide them the tools and the resources. They can focus on what they are truly passionate about, which is the reason they started their DAOs and their communities, versus having to rely or having to figure all these issues out and potentially have negative consequences because they may make mistakes.
I agree with you 100%. And that is like what you just said is exactly why Function and I want to be having these conversations out in the open on spaces, right? Because a lot of this stuff, a lot of reinventing the wheel is happening inside of these little groups. And if you get out there and poke around, like you're someone who's in a bunch of DAOs, right? And looking at what they're doing, you can see pretty clearly that the tech isn't the rate limiting factor. It's but the pieces haven't all been put together. There's not a repository of wisdom. There's not like, context specific templates that people can put in place and participation guidelines that are easy to follow, that would allow for these, like a more streamlined interaction with the DAOs without having to become governance experts to figure out the nuts and bolts to get it going.
Well, and I also think there's this misunderstanding when with DAO infrastructure that people are assuming DAO infrastructure encompasses the majority of what you would need to facilitate a DAO. And really proposals in treasury management are not the bulk of what you're actually having to do to keep engagement, to execute on projects properly. And that's actually one thing we're also trying to challenge is some of these DAO infrastructure to take a much broader approach and not just be about that technical governance piece, but more about the human element and management oversight and social aspects that are critical for growth of DAOs. I think DAOs by themselves, if we're looking purely the definition of a DAO, that technical system, they just need people to perform operations. That's it. Follow processes, follow tasks. But the problem is for us to have human capital that DAOs can leverage, use, and find and incentivize, we need to create a full ecosystem that sustains the human elements of those communities. And that's why I think you're seeing more of these groups like MonkeyDAO and that growing is because people want somewhere to be to sustain that human social element. And unless we get that right, DAOs are not going to have the resources they need to be able to scale and handle more complex activities like intended.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, this has been such an awesome conversation. I think I could go on and on with you guys, but I actually have a hard stop that was supposed to be 2 minutes ago, so I'm going to have to jump off. But maybe we can do it again. I don't know what happens, but this has been such a rich conversation. I look forward to digesting everything that was shared. So really, really appreciate all of you guys for being on here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.